Listening to the Be a Better Being podcast hosted by Michelle Zellner and Sasha Berscheid. Michelle and Sasha are here to give you information and inspiration to help you live your healthiest, happiest lives. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
Greetings, everybody. Before you dip into the conversation, I just want to give a little warning that we do touch on the topic of suicide. So if you feel like that is not something you are ready to listen to at this moment, I'm going to ask you to bow out right now. If you are ready for a really great, empowering, inspiring conversation, keep on listening. Greetings. Thank you for tuning in to the Be a Better Being podcast. I'm Michelle Zellner, your host, joined today by my friend Monte Land. Monte and I know each other through a work connection, and I am really looking forward to this conversation we're going to have today. So Monte, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. It's my pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So I always think it's better for the guests to do their own intros because you know yourself better than I do. Why don't you give us a little back history on yourself and how we know each other, and then we're gonna swim into some really maybe difficult conversation, but very helpful and useful and important conversation.
Absolutely. So we'll just do the short version. You know, everybody knows my name now. I'm Monte, and I'm originally from Chicago. I now live in North Carolina. So I was born and raised in Chicago, lived there until I was 18. Chose not to go to college because my goals were all messed up. My goals was to, at that time, chase girls and party, and my parents would not have liked that. So I chose to join the Marines and went on active duty, and I served for 22 years, 6 months, and 24 days. Deployed a few times, and life just kind of, went on after that. And yeah, that's pretty much who I am. And we connected through a mutual work connection, and I'm just happy to be here and share my story with everyone.
Well, I'm excited for you to share your story as well. That was a very brief background history. We are going to explore and unpack a lot of it. First of all, thank you for your service. I mean, I have a tremendous appreciation for people who serve in the military. My dad served 4 years in the Air Force. Then he met my mom, and they decided that the military life wasn't what they wanted. Right. But it's always been something I've been incredibly grateful for, living in Hawaii for 4 years of my life and being surrounded by military bases everywhere. My very first really serious relationship was a Army soldier. And so it is something that I've always had an appreciation, even though I don't have a super strong root in, and our family doesn't have super strong roots. I have lots of friends who have served. And I think even, growing up an athlete and you stand and you have the national anthem play, I always still to this day, I get goosebumps whenever I hear the national anthem. It doesn't matter where I am, who's playing, what's happening. It is just something that I am very emotional about. So thank you for your service. Is there a history of service in your family, or why the Marines over any of the other options out there?
Yes. Well, there's a large history of military in my family, but everybody chose the same route, and they all went either to the Army or the Navy. I had a couple of family members and some friends that joined the Air Force, and I was like, I want to be different. And I wanted that challenge. And, I just always looked at Marines as holding themselves to a higher standard. And I did it for several reasons. One, because nobody in my family had ever done it before. And then secondly, because I had people tell me that I couldn't do it. And I'm that guy, if you tell me I can't, I'm going to do it to prove you wrong. And so that's why I made the choice. And, I wanted to be a part of something that would give me a pride of belonging, a sense of belonging, but yet challenge me to be better than I am or better than I was and just not be average. So that's why I chose the Marines.
Well, it sounds like a good choice. And what specifically within the Marines was your job? What did you do?
Started my first 4 years was actually in the infantry. So I had a good time. You learn a lot, and it's just one of those things. Everything you do, you carry your lifestyle on your back. And so, and you commit a lot of things to memory, but it challenges you to know that if, real world events happen, you're there at the forefront of it. So I did that for my first enlistment, and I actually got out for about 10 months. And I decided that, it's something I wanted to continue to do. So I came back as an engineer, as a heavy equipment operator. So I was an engineer operator for a while, and that was actually the rest of my career. But throughout that time, I eventually went to school, became an engineer chief. So I learned how to do a lot of different things. And I spent time as a recruiter for the Marines. I was a sexual assault victim response person. I also did substance abuse control for a while, drug testing, things like that. And whatever I could do to keep me aligned and in touch with people, that's what I did. And then after that, because of some of my personal experiences, I became a suicide prevention master trainer. So I trained the personnel that actually did the teaching or taught or instruction for suicide prevention. So I did a lot of different things. I had a lot of collateral duties, but it was all to just make me better. Yes.
I love that. As the theme of this podcast is be a better being, you've been doing that your whole life, or at least once you joined the Marines. A couple of those things are pretty heavy, right? Working to be on the forefront for suicide prevention and working with sexual assault victims.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about your personal experience and maybe what steered you into, going down those paths.
Okay. Those two, I chose. Every collateral duty, I chose it for a specific reason. But when it came to the sexual assault victim response, and I'll just straight into it. Between the ages of 6 and 8 years old, I was sexually assaulted and molested by someone. And for years, for a long time after that, for years, I questioned who I was. Not only just questioning my sexuality, but why did this happen to me? And experiencing a lot of things in life. And it's just like, where did this come from? And I didn't know who to talk to at that time because I was made to feel like, it's your fault. So, I'm touching you because it's your fault, or you're here because it's your fault. And I realized that a lot of times people didn't have that voice. So I made the decision that if people needed a voice or someone to talk to, or at least someone to just listen to them, I would be that person. So to either be the voice or be the listening ear. And then from the suicide prevention portion of it, early in my career, actually after I had been in right about 2 years, just over 2 years, I was going to attempt suicide. And so what happened was I found a place to put a rope in a drop ceiling, and I hung it and did the test on it to make sure it would hold me. And I wrote 3 letters that day, early that morning. And I wrote one to my friends, one to my family, and one to my chain of command to explain to them why I was going to do it, or why I took that action. Because I felt like, if I was no longer here because of other things that came along with it, that I would just be better off. So the day that I was going to do it, I had a gentleman just kind of standing off to the side. We were waiting to leave to get off work that afternoon. And this guy was just staring at me off to the side. He was looking at me. And I'm like, why is this dude staring at me? And he kind of beckoned for me like this. And he said, hey, go to my office. I'm like, what did I do? I didn't do anything. Just leave me alone. All I want to do is get out of here. You just don't know, literally get out of here. And I went to his office and I sat there and waited for him for about 20 minutes. And he eventually came in and he just started to have a conversation with me. And a couple of things stood out, and he said, well, I'm leaving to go to the West Coast because we were in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina at the time. He was leaving to go to Camp Pendleton in 8 months. He said, but I'm going to mentor you for the next 8 months. He said, because you're a smart guy, but you make dumb decisions because you hang around dumb people and you choose not to make decisions on your own. I said, okay. And so he talked to me for a while and we developed that relationship. But that day I said, can I give you something? And I want you to hold it until you leave. He said, yes. So I went back to my room. I grabbed the 3 letters. I gave them to him. I said, hold these until you leave. So fast forward through the story. Over the period of 8 months, he had me volunteer at like the USO, which is a service organization for service members. I had to volunteer at churches, at the Boys and Girls Club, at different events, things like that. He made me read books I didn't want to read. And when we would have physical training in the morning at 6:30, he would come to my door sometimes at 4:30 in the morning, 4:15, wake me up. He would say, hey, let's go. And he would go run physical training with me. We would come back and then do it again with everybody else. I was in excellent shape at that time. Life just kind of went on. And then but it helped transition me to a different place into a lot of who I am today. So fast forward through the story, 8 months go by and my life, literally, I began to see my life from a different perspective. And so as we went through the process, he sat down with me. He said, well, tomorrow's my last day. It was a Thursday. He said, tomorrow's my last day here. He said, but you gave me something. And he said, some letters. Did you want me to read them? I said, yeah. So I gave him the 3 letters and he opened them up and read them. He said, when did you write this? And we were getting off at 11 o'clock that day. I literally written them like 4:35 in the morning. I said, literally like 5 or 6 hours before you talked to me, that's when I wrote those letters. And I made up my mind. I said by 11:15, 11:30, because we were getting off early. I said, when everybody was gone is when I was going to do it. And we got up from his office and I walked him back to the building and I left that rope hanging there and I moved the ceiling out of the way and the rope fell. And he just had this look like, no way. And I said, yeah, that was it. And so we had a conversation and we finished up. But the part that really made the difference in my life was he looked me right in my eyes and he said, Land, my last name. He said, Land. He said, I'm glad we had this time together, but your responsibility for the rest of your life is for you to do for someone else what I've done for you. And that is a lot of what has driven me to do what I do, to be the voice for other people, to talk to people, be a mentor, be a friend, to be a listening ear. And that has driven me to where I am today. And that's why I love facilitating and talking and, talking to people like you, because I see it this way. Like we had mentioned before, I don't have a niche market. People aren't niche, but people need help. And my goal every day is to do for someone else what somebody did for me. And that's why I do what I do.
I mean, that is a bone-chilling story, and I was getting choked up and teary-eyed and goosebumpy during all of that, from the very first, sharing of your sexual abuse as a child, and then, wow, and there was something that officer saw in you that made him pull you aside that day.
Yes.
And you and I talk a lot about the need for human connection and the need for awareness. And I mean, we'll get into what you actually do these days. People can probably kind of guess you talk on this kind of stuff, but let's go back a little bit and just talk about your own healing process. Did you ever actually go through traditional therapy, some kind of therapy, to heal from all of that trauma that you sustained as a child? And how do you get to a place where you can trust an adult figure, trust somebody that is supposed to be, helping you, guiding you? How do you move past all of that into what is clearly a very successful, outgoing, kind, compassionate human that you are today?
It was a process. And to be completely honest, I would say in the early years of my life, no, I didn't seek professional help, and I didn't tell anybody. I kept it a secret until I was probably 30, maybe 30 years old, 29. I was maybe 30, 31 years old is when I actually told someone about it for the first time. And part of what helped me out was the process, or the mentoring process, with the guy who helped me. His name is Charles. I tell him all the time, I tell the story, but his name is Charles. That's his first name. And, through that process, it helped me a lot. But I didn't really go or seek professional help or counseling, until I was 30. And not just from that, I think I was 37 years old when I first went to and sat down and talked to a mental health professional. And that was literally from something else, from another story that kind of led up to where I am today. And if we have time, we'll get into it. But it was one of those things I tried to figure it out on my own. And that's why I tell people, don't be afraid to talk. Don't be afraid to open up, because when you suppress those thoughts and those feelings and those emotions for years, that it's not healthy at all. And I didn't realize how unhealthy it was. And now I literally live my best life because I'm not afraid to talk about it. I have nothing to share. Is it kind of embarrassing? Yes, it is. But I realized this. I've helped more people by talking about it than I would have by holding it in. So I'm not embarrassed by it at all. I'm not at all. Yeah.
As you shouldn't be. And I think that's part of why you and I do what we do, is that we have to have these conversations, because if you don't get to the root of the pain and the trauma to allow it to heal, it is going to manifest in a whole bunch of different ways. Right. And there's a very good chance that even you contemplating suicide is because it was rooted in all of this confusion and shame and guilt and who am I? And I don't trust anybody. And right. And then, I mean, did that lead to, the ways to cope? Like, did you notice that it affected your relationships, how well you did in school, partying, I think you said, turning to maybe substances? Was any of that also part of trying to cope with what had happened to you as a child?
Oh, absolutely. It was. I would use alcohol as a numbing effect. I tell people I was a functioning drunk. I would never say that I was an alcoholic because I got up and went to work every single day. But to be able to just drink and numb myself and just move past it and laugh and party and, be the life of the party, stuff like that, and not doing anything crazy, but that's who I was. But little did I know until I actually faced it, it was just me masking something that happened earlier on in life. And so later on, I didn't really talk about it. And the first person that I actually expressed it to was my wife. We were in the middle of a conversation one day and she was like, well, why is this? And why is that? And then it just came out and I told her. And it was like a freeing moment for me. And that led up to after my last combat deployment, which was in 2007. I was in the car one day, and I'm going back on the story a little bit, but it'll kind of bring it all together. But I was in the car, and my son and I were driving a baseball practice. He was playing, and I was one of the assistant coaches on the team. And he asked me a very simple question, and my response was like, I don't know. was like, Dad, what's wrong? Like, it just, I just like asked you a question. And he said, why'd you snap on me? I said, and I didn't snap on you. And that was my response. And he was like, okay. So we kept driving, and I talked to him and I apologized to him. And then the very next day I went to work, and I have a good friend named Anthony. We were working together at the time. I said, man, do you think I can be kind of edgy sometimes? He was like, sometimes. He's like, dude, you're always edgy. I was like, I'm not edgy. He was like, see, that's my point. And he asked me, he said, have you sat down and talked to a mental health professional? And I said, no. And out of ignorance, and this is no knock on the mental health profession whatsoever. Out of ignorance, my response was, well, I'm not sitting down to talk to the crazy doctor because I'm not crazy. So only a crazy person will sit down, talk to crazy people, and give them crazy advice. That's not me. And he said something. He said, man, listen. He said, I went and it helped me. So I'm suggesting that you go. He said, this is what we'll do. He said, I'm going to go with you to make the appointment, and I will go to the initial appointment with you. So against my will, we went. October 9th, 2008, I had a 30-minute intake to go sit down and meet the doctor for the first time. They ask you the initial questions, whatever, and while you were in therapy. And I sat down in the chair, and I was angry, like kind of when I sat down. I looked at my watch, it was 1:29. I said, Doc, you have 30 minutes. And I'm out of here. And he just kind of leaned back in his chair. He's like, okay, and smirked at me. I'm like, oh, whatever. So we started talking, and I'm just going through the story, fast forward the story. He said, okay. And he looked at me. He said, well, where have you been, and why haven't you been here to talk to me? I said, well, and I told him the same thing. I said, I didn't think I needed help. I didn't think I needed assistance. And a lot of the stuff from my childhood and up until the suicidal ideations, and then dealing with the stress and the effects of combat and the things that I saw, I was sharing all of this stuff. I sat down for a 30-minute intake. I left at 4:00. I sat down at 1:30. I left at 4:00. And I didn't realize how much stuff over periods of time and over throughout years that I just pushed down and suppressed and said, oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. But I wasn't okay. And that's why I'm a firm believer now. If you need mental health help, absolutely sit down in a chair and go talk to somebody. Lay on the couch. I don't care what you do, but do it. You have to take care of yourself.
Well, and we're talking 15 years ago, right? Before we actually had open conversations about these things. And
Yes.
I mean, I think about you as an individual, a male, an African-American male who's in the military,
Yes.
right? You are the toughest of the tough. Like you're okay. You cannot acknowledge that you're not okay.
That's right.
So did any of those three things also play into kind of this, like, I'm fine, I don't need you, I can get through things on my own kind of
Absolutely.
mentality?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, having children and being married, you don't talk about it. You don't show signs of weakness. And then being an African-American male in the African-American community, for us, it was not the norm or regular as the way it is now to talk about mental health. It was just like, oh, you'll be okay, get some sleep, or, go out and party, hang out, or whatever it was. You just coped. And then being a Marine, that was another reason I didn't want the stigma that came behind it. Well, now you're weak, or, you're showing signs of weakness and you can't lead as effectively, and all of these thoughts were things that I was telling myself. Nobody said it, but I just assumed that's what it was. So like you said, being a male, being an African-American male, and then being a Marine and in a leadership position at that time. Yeah, that was part of the reason I didn't want to go. For all of those reasons, I said, no, I wouldn't do it. But after I went to see where I am now, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So after that first 30-minute intake, how did therapy play a role in your life going forward then?
From that 30-minute intake that lasted 3.5 hours, I was there every week for, I think it was 45 minutes every week. And then it went to every 2 weeks, and then eventually to once a month. And then it was like every 3 months after that, over a period of time. And so my initial appointment was in 2008, and I would go as regularly as I should have. And I retired in February 2013. And I still continue that process. I mean, even if I feel like I don't need to go, I still go, because there are things that sometimes we realize there are issues that we don't want to talk about, or things that bother us that we don't share. And I still make it a habit. And it's not that I take anything away from anybody's faith or how you feel or what's going on in life, but my thought process is this: if you need the help, get it. And it doesn't matter what your background is. And that's where move away from the stigmas. And I think that's a lot of the reason people don't go.
It is, which is why we're having these conversations and we're going to continue to have them. I think, COVID certainly highlighted it and advanced the conversation.
Yes.
I mean, by leaps and bounds, but we still have a long way to go. It goes back to something I say all the time in the classes I teach and even on this podcast, that as humans, we are supposed to be doing things with each other. We're not supposed to be trying to figure it all out on our own, right? The benefit of being part of a pack, and humans are pack animals,
Mhm.
is that there are other people in the pack who are there to support you,
Yes.
to guide you, to nurture you, to teach you, for you to lean on, for you to celebrate, for them to celebrate you, to hold you accountable, to challenge you. And this idea that we are just supposed to all figure it out on our own, I mean, I don't know where that idea came from, quite honestly. I'm sure there's roots somewhere in it, but it's really critical that we all start to remember that as a human specimen, we're supposed to do things together.
That's right.
And there shouldn't be this stigma for needing help. And I mean, a stigma is a stigma because we keep saying it's a stigma.
Exactly.
Honestly, I really think that's it. And there are always going to be people, no matter what, who don't get it, who don't buy into it, who are just like, oh, just snap out of it, or, oh, you'll be fine. Because maybe they don't have either challenges,
Yes.
or they don't have the self-awareness, or maybe they've put up so many shields for themselves, they don't even know that their human is suffering and could actually benefit from help.
That's right. You said something. As humans, we're designed to go and move as a pack. One of my mentors, John Maxwell, he has this thing, and I don't know if he created the phrase or if he got it from someone else, but I learned it from him. And he always says, he said, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And you ever notice when you do things as a group, how much faster and how much easier it is, and how much time you have when you go out to dinner or whatever it is? It's always better when you're in a group or in a pack. And we can excel and go a whole lot further if we simply go together. And I learned the hard way. And that's why I tell people, look at me. Don't be like I was, So yeah, stop trying to do it alone and join the pack and move forward.
Yeah. And I think it just requires each of us to recognize that we are all very much more alike than we are different.
Yes.
Now, the things that have gotten us to where we are might be packaged differently. And I certainly didn't go through any of the experiences that you did. And I never can say that I get how you feel or what that was like. There's no possible way. But my experiences were challenging for me, and I had to figure out how to move past them, right? So even if you didn't have some childhood trauma, or you didn't experience combat, which, oh my gosh, you add all of that up, right? The more traumas we have, probably the more we're going to have to figure out how to heal. Just like the more cuts and bruises you have, the longer it's going to take to physically heal you.
That's right.
So, whether it's because you're a veteran, you've seen combat, or you are somebody who did suffer some childhood trauma, or as an adult, you experience trauma of any kind, you have to heal the trauma, and pretending it's not there is not healing it.
It's not helping at all.
Not at all. In fact, often what we do then is we turn to things to mask it, to minimize it, to distract ourselves from it. I mean, I know a lot of people that they're, like you were saying, the life of the party. And not always, but very often, that's an act.
Mm-hmm.
It's an act to cover up what's really going on deep down inside. Not always.
That's true.
But very often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm a firm believer in this, and that is who we are and what we show people. Oftentimes, what we see right now is fake, the external us. I tell people, I don't care. You wake up in the morning, you put on makeup, or you do your hair, or the lack thereof, or, you put on your favorite shirt or your favorite blouse. And we get prepared to go out and show people who we really are. But internally, and who we are subconsciously, it's the real us. So the part that people should know about us, they don't get to see, because we show them this smile. And like you said, we cover it all and we mask it all up with different things, and we smile. And I tell you, for me, it was alcohol. I would hide behind it. And it was never that, I was running around like, doing pranks and jokes and things like that. But it would give me the opportunity to just smile and say, you know what, I'm not hurting right now. I'm okay. But inside, if I could cover my camera up, it would just simply be like inside I was screaming for so long. Like if people only knew and I'm screaming, help me, that's where it was. But I honestly believe, like you said, you have to really show people who you are. And when you do that, you make and you show that level of transparency. I think that's when the impact comes. And that's why people like you doing what you do, that's when people see the change. They see the impact because you're genuine in who you are and what you do and show that you really care about people. And that's where change and transition happens.
Well, and before you can even show people who you really are, you have to accept who you really are.
It's true.
And that's hard, right? I mean, I'm sure it took you a long time to accept that it wasn't your fault,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
That you had to go through all of that, and everybody, and sometimes that's it. We don't want to actually get to know ourselves because it's yucky. There might be some yucky stuff I'd rather not know about.
True.
I'd rather not acknowledge.
Mhm.
And then I have to figure out, well, what do I do with that yucky stuff?
That's right.
And yet, again, we're all very much more alike than we are different. We've all had challenges in life. Some are way more significant than others. There's no doubt about that. And yet, we all have the opportunity to forgive, to heal, to grow stronger physically, mentally, and emotionally, to become more resilient, and then do something positive with it, which is what is so beautiful about your very story, Monty, because what you are doing now, you would not be an effective communicator had you not gone through those experiences.
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
So let's,
Go ahead.
yeah, take us to the present, and just share a little bit about how you do use your gifts and talents, and the experiences that you've had to help others.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to something. It seems like I have more stories than Ernest Hemingway, but when you say certain things, you trigger thoughts in my mind, and you go back to like the similarities we have. We don't realize them until you begin to grow and you choose to grow. Growing up in Chicago, I lived in Inglewood, which is an all-black neighborhood. Actually, I take that back. There was one white family on the block. They were the only one within probably a 5-mile radius. But in 1978 or 79, whatever year it was, when I was in second grade, they started what was called the busing program. So they took African American kids out of all black schools and they bused us to all white schools. So here I am, one of 30 African American kids in this all white school, and I'm looking around like, okay, man, I'm lost. But this day was a defining moment for me. Probably a couple of weeks into the school year, we were doing sentence structure. And we had to write a paragraph. And the story was, what did you eat for dinner the night before? So sitting to my right was a guy named Rodney. And Rodney and I we still talk to this day. But this is second grade in the early or late 70s. And so he's telling the story. And the culmination of the story was what you ate for dinner. So he's finishing his story and he gets to the very end. And he was like, so for dinner last night, we had mashed potatoes and gravy, string beans, and fried chicken. It's like, this is the, and I'm like, what? And so now Miss Morgan, who was our teacher, is talking to him and I'm waving my hand. I'm jumping up and down. I'm like, huh? And she eventually called him and she was like, Monty, what is it? I said, Miss Morgan, he's lying. She's like, what do you mean he's lying? I said, Miss Morgan, he didn't eat fried chicken for dinner last night. She said, how did you know? Were you at his house? I said, no, but I know white people don't eat fried chicken. She said, what? She said, boy, everybody eats fried chicken. And that day, a light bulb came on. Because it taught me two things. One, I want to know where, and I still question myself to this day, where did that stereotype come from that I was to think that way in second grade. And then secondly, we have a lot of commonalities. And it just put me in a place where from that day forward, I began to see life differently. I began to grow and I began to see things in a way that, you know what, we are a lot alike and a lot the same. And so those experiences and things like that kind of propelled me and catapulted me into where I am today. And so I spend a lot of my time doing facilitations and trainings, and I try to talk to as many veterans organizations and veterans groups as I can. And I share my story and talk to them about that because suicide is very prevalent in our community. Because a lot of people don't know, but we have on average 22, the number is 22. We have 22 veterans every day in America that commit suicide every day. That's not counting the attempts. It's 22 every day that literally successfully pass away. And that's not even a success, but 22 veterans that pass away from suicide every day. So I do it that way. And then just, regular communications through webinars and trainings and things like that, so that I can share my story with people, and not just always that, but just saying from where I stand and from the experiences I had, your life can be a lot better than it is. And you don't have to wait a long time for it to start. To get yourself mentally healthy, it takes some effort. It takes vulnerability. It takes, you seeing yourself beyond where you are. Because I'm a firm believer in you have to see further than your eyes can take you. And so you have to see it. And that's what I use my time and my talents for.
And it's such a great use of your time and talents because it is so necessary. I mean, it's heartbreaking that that is a statistic, and it's unfortunately not getting better. And just the increase of all mental health issues and attempts of suicide across the board are teenagers. I
Yes.
mean, and so again, it doesn't have to be that necessarily were in combat, but certainly the more trauma and challenges you have faced, you have to heal from them, which means you have to take the initiative, right? And
Mhm.
that's part of the hard part is raising your hand, stepping out. But on the other side, other people also need to start to have awareness.
Yes.
We need to be more like your officer who said, "Hey, come to my office."
Mhm.
Right? So we have to be better about establishing that actual human connection, maintaining that connection, checking in on our friends,
Yes.
just a quick text, whatever, just something that lets somebody else know I got my eyes on you.
Yes.
Because I'm willing to bet if he had not called you over, we would not be having this conversation today.
I can guarantee you we would not be having this conversation today. Yeah. I think back now and I look at my life, it was like, man, at that time, I think I was 21, just turning 22, just turned 22. I knew nothing about life at that moment, but I figured, you know what? This is the easiest thing to do. I wasn't even 22 yet. I was 21. And now to be 51 years old, almost 51, it's like, wow. And I look at all the things I would have missed. It's wow. It's different. It's different.
And all the people who would have missed you.
Yes.
I mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
think about that. Like, all this amazing impact and the influences you've had on people, that none of that would have been an option. And so, we are in that place in society where we don't like hard things.
Mhm.
We don't like to struggle. We're like, oh, it's hard.
Yeah.
Life is hard.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Mhm.
But we, as Sasha always says, we are made to do hard things.
That's right.
And so while it seems really, really hard in the moment, there are so many ways to get over the moment, right? And it just, obviously then when we start putting substances in the mix where now you can't even think and make a good decision because you've been cognitively altered because of a
Yes.
substance. These things often go hand in hand. So, if we're seeing either in someone else or we're recognizing it in ourselves that the substance use is maybe not just because I enjoy it, but for another reason,
Mhm.
that's also a sign, right? Your body and brain are trying to give you a sign that's like, yeah, I'd like if you got some help for me,
Yes.
but you got to listen. You have to take care of your human and listen to those signs.
Mhm.
So, what are some of the tangible ways or things that people can do, or that ways that you help them, especially when they're in that deep dark moment? Like, what is like a go-to thing that they can do?
There are several things. One, if you don't have someone immediately available, have resources that you can use and know what those resources are. If it's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, or if you work somewhere that has a EAP, use those resources. But my thing is I always have an accountability partner or that person that I can talk to. And I have certain friends that listen. If my phone rings at 2 a.m, and I normally would turn my phone off, but I do have some friends that, if something happens, call me. It doesn't matter what time of day or night it is, call me, because we don't know when that moment may happen. So I'll always say have resources and a direct person that you can reach out to. Exercise is a huge part of it, because I didn't realize how much when you suppress the toxins that are in your body and the things we don't let out, which leads into what you do, helping people be fit, not just mentally fit, but physically fit. That's a huge part of it, because you don't realize what it does to you, why you feel sluggish or down and depressed, because you don't do anything. And you get sedentary and you start sitting around and think about how many people work from home now because of COVID and things like that. And then they rely on, the alcohol. I'm going to say this really quickly. I'm going to come back to what you were saying. And I thought about this. You spark a lot of things but in North Carolina, they said in the first 120 days, alcohol sales in North Carolina alone increased by 600%. That tells a story. 600% in 120 days. So I'm saying in that 4-month period, what were these people going through? And then why did they not reach out to somebody else? And so that's why I say it's very important that you have the resources or have people that you can talk to, exercise, get yourself physically fit, get mentally fit, and then also have something that you can do or create a hobby. I love softball. I like going to the ranges and firing firearms. You have to find something that you enjoy, that brings you pleasure, that takes you away from the day to day and gives you that freedom of mind and just, so, and then take some quiet time. And many people don't do that. They're afraid to be quiet. Everywhere they go, it's noise. It's noise. You get in the car, you turn on the radio. You come home, you're not even watching the TV, but you turn the TV on so that you can hear the noise. If you sit in your man cave or your office or wherever you are, there's noise. You pick up the phone and call somebody. There's always noise. But people are afraid to just sit down and stop and have that quiet time and be quiet or meditate or pray or do what it takes to settle themselves. And most people are afraid of that. But you have to build yourself up to that point where you can cut out some of the noise and then allow yourself to truly listen to who you are. Although it may be ugly, we have to deal with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And those are just some of the things that I suggest people do, because that's what I do. Yes.
Great tips. All ones that I am in 100% alignment. Absolutely. Because again, it's a holistic approach. This is a human specimen.
Mhm.
It needs a whole bunch of things, right? It needs movement. Movement is medicine.
Mhm.
Proper nourishment, minimal poison. Definitely, we have to do things that nourish our spirit and our soul. Those are things for joy, creativity, the hobby. Get out in nature. We're not supposed to be in boxes. We're actually supposed to be outside in actual daylight and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And the quiet time. And I have long said that people don't like to be quiet, because then they'll have to actually hear what's going on up in there, and they don't like it.
Yes.
And yet, unless you actually hear what's going on up in there, you aren't going to learn anything. You're not going to be able to do what's necessary to maybe grow out of what is going on up in there.
Yes.
So it's hard now or harder later. Once again, that is going to play out in so many examples. As we are coming up on Veterans Day, that's really, kind of what the impetus for getting this conversation going with you and I am going to just speak specifically to the veterans, because I think there is so much on your plate that somebody who hasn't served cannot possibly imagine. Now, there might be other professions that have similar experiences, and certainly even within the military community, everybody's got a different experience, right? But if you are somebody that has seen combat, seen really hard things, been involved in really hard things, and you are still tough guy or girl, you are a tough guy or girl, there's no doubt about it,
Yes.
but you are also still a human.
That's right.
And I am going to just echo Monty's sentiments to please talk about it,
Yes.
right? With whoever, your friend, your buddy, a therapist, a pastor, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
You have to get things out of your head,
Mhm.
because all it's going to do is replay. And every time we replay negative experiences, we actually kick into fight or flight, because your body and brain don't know the difference between the real experience and one that you are replaying.
Exactly.
And once that fight or flight kicks in, it is going to alter how you think, how you feel, and how you act.
Sure.
And none of that is going to be good.
Mhm.
So if we can just get to the root at some of the things that are going on and learn to heal and process and cope with them, everybody will be benefiting from that.
Absolutely.
So, Monty, before we officially wrap up, we'll put all the links and ways to get in touch with you. But is there anything that we missed that you want listeners to make sure they know?
Yes. And you pretty much just said it, but many people feel like, well, I wasn't a veteran and I never served. And, coming up on Veterans Day, we honor the veterans for the service that they've given to this country. But a lot of people don't realize that you have people like you who are dependent family members, children or wives, or, wherever you fit in. It could be parents. You are literally a part of that same lifestyle. And even if you aren't related to a person that is, or have a friend or a family member that's a veteran, life happens every day. And many people feel like, well, because I didn't experience combat, there is no post-traumatic stress. Listen, stress is everywhere. Traumatic stress is everywhere. And so we have to realize that it's okay to ask for help. I don't care what the situation is. There's always an opportunity for you to open that door and say, you know what, here's who I am. And I'm willing to put myself aside to really find out who I am. And that's a process. And that's why I'm a firm believer in the quiet time. And like you said, talk to your pastor, talk to a mentor, talk to someone and get these thoughts out of your head. Because if you don't, even if you journal them and write them down, it's still a matter of, can I share this with somebody else? Because when you try to hold it in and figure it out on your own, we never do. And if we know what to do, we don't. We never execute. Yeah, I ask people all the time to write certain things down. And I said, now when you complete this, write the word execution at the very bottom. After you get all the notes and you hear all of the points and all of the bullets, and you have, man, this is great information. Woo! And we pay to go to seminars and, and thousands of dollars to sit in this room and we gather all this information on how to be better business owners, how to be better parents, how to be better siblings, how to be better spouses and make your marriage better, how to be a better Christian, how to be a better. We get all of this information and then we leave that Friday or whatever day it ends, we close the book and it goes on a shelf, but we execute none of it. Think about it. If we executed on 20% of what we learned, how much better we'd be. They say most people that purchase a book, they said 80% of people that purchase books never finish them. 80%. So think about if we just executed on small things, how much different our life would be. So yeah, it's amazing.
That is amazing. And that is such a great tip. It's such a great point. It's something that at the end of every training, I tell people, okay, it's great that you came and you listened, but what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
Right?
Yes.
You have to be a doer.
Yes.
And half the time I ask them, put something in the chat box. Tell me specifically one thing you're going to do. Mm-hmm. Most people won't. You know why? Because once you say it out loud, now it's real.
Exactly. And they're afraid that now I'm going to be held accountable to myself.
Exactly. Yes. So that is a great one to wrap up on, because that's the whole point of the Be a Better Being podcast, to give you information and inspiration so that you can go and do things to be a better being. So Monte, thank you so much for this conversation. It was absolutely my pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. But before we go, I have to tell you something. So after my experience of dealing with suicide and ideations and things like that, I was just in my quiet time one day and I was thinking that there's 22 veterans that commit suicide every day. But whatever I can do to combat that, I'm going to do it. So I was just sitting in my quiet time one day and I just started writing. Then I counted. I was like, man, I have 22 things here. And I started looking at it in detail. And what I did was I created a t-shirt, and it's called 2TAC2, which is number 22. And the TAC is Till All Seas. It's the acronym Till All Seas. And on the back of the shirt, so this is what the front of it looks like. It's 2TAC2. And on the back of the shirt is 22 reasons to live. And at the very bottom, it says keep pushing. And then it has my name, Coach Monte, on the back. So I want to thank you for having me on the show. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get your address and I'm going to mail you a shirt. And I want you to wear this shirt as often as I would say every day, but I want you to wear this shirt because you're going to send a message to somebody, even if they're not a veteran. You'll send a message to somebody. They'll say, man, here's another reason for me to hang around for another day, another month, another year for the rest of my life. So I'm going to put that in the mail and send it to you. So thank you so much for your time. I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. And let's continue to make an impact and change the world.
Well, thank you. I will wear that shirt with pleasure and with pride. And this has been great. Thank you so much, Monte. Everybody, I mean, I hope you are absorbing and digesting this, and then you are actually going to go do something to be a better being.
Yes, I like that. Be a better being.
Thank you for listening to the Be a Better Being podcast. Michelle and Sasha hope that what you heard today inspires you to embrace this journey of life with an open mind, a kind heart, and a willingness to learn and evolve. If you enjoyed the content, please help spread their message by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. If you have a show topic idea or would like to be a guest, please visit betterbeings.net and fill out a contact form. Until next time, go and be a better being.